Hello and welcome back to All Four Wins Football. We are back again. It's a Monday evening. Crikey, this one could go on for years. It feels like there's that many things to talk about. The international break is over. The WSL, I know what you're saying, Tony, but the door's open ever so slightly at the top. Managerial merry-go-rounds and the possibility that relegation might be relegated. More after this. Hello and welcome. We've nearly killed a person, which is not quite how we wanted to start things. But you just never know, do you? You just never know. Listen, lovely to have you all along with us once again. It's been an interesting international break, but we are back for more fun and games. And we've got two of our three musketeers pulled back in, fresh from being away for a week. Is Mr. Sean. How are you doing, sir? You okay?
Oh, very well. Thank you, Barry. How are you?
Yes, loving life as we should be. And of course, just below us, we have got the regular that is now, the Rogers. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yes, just as well as I was 20 seconds ago. So all is well. Not a lot has changed. So yeah, really, really good. Lots for us to get through today. Thank you to those who have already started putting comments in. We will ask him in just a moment. Well, we'll ask him now. Why not? Did you go a little trip to Italy, Sean?
It was beautiful. It was lovely. It was nice to be in a city that's actually quite well known for once with Wales away. Yeah, in Monza, went to Milan, did some sightseeing on the Friday morning. Overall, a good game. Good to meet some fans. Good beer. All in all, a lovely trip to Italy, I have to admit.
Good. Well, that is what we like to hear. Okay, well, we're going to get ourselves properly kicked off. There is lots and lots to go through. We are going to go to Sean again and ask him a little bit about the Nations League, because obviously a lot of time was spent over that fortnight with lots of games being played. We don't just want to concentrate on the home nations necessarily, but you know, there wasn't a huge number of massive games going out there. Austria beating Scotland was perhaps a bit of a depressing moment for them. Obviously, you just mentioned you went to Italy, but that was, of course, for the Italy-Wales game, and Wales come home having narrowly been defeated there as well. But I mean, some fairly good results there. Netherlands and Germany drawing, Portugal and England drawing. It was an interesting start to it. Did you see, after seeing those results, a team like England going on to then go and steal the win against Spain? What was your thoughts, I suppose, really, is where we're going at, Sean, of the opening parts of the Nations League? Was it everything you dreamed it would be and more?
Oh, I dream about the Nations League on a regular basis, and I have big ambitions for what Nations League could be. What I think it showed is ahead of this summer's Euros in particular, I think it's wide open. I think we've seen results from around the continent where some of the teams we think are going to do well perhaps had a bit of a stumble. So you look at, I know England have beaten Spain, but that draw against Portugal, I think, throws a little bit of doubt in. Sweden's draw with Wales, um, Netherlands narrowly getting past Scotland. I think only France were the only big team to win both games in the Nations League, so that's something for them potentially. But yeah, I think it's shown that this summer's wide open. But I think across the Nations League, right, even down to League C, you had some really interesting results. I mean, that Ireland loss away at Slovenia, that 4-0 loss, that is quite the shock. I think that shows the job that Carla Ward's got on her hands and how much of a transition it's going to be for her and the Irish team. But Gibraltar having two narrow 1-0 defeats in their first ever competitive games, I thought those were quite interesting. But yeah, I think it's been an international window that's shown that everything is wide open and not predictable for once, which I think is really quite refreshing heading into a big summer tournament.
Imagine having tournaments where things aren't predictable. Not that we're going to talk anything much about all of your predictions that we did just a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure they're not going to resurface in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But B, same sort of question for you, really. I mean, looking at the opening couple of games across the groups, Germany and Netherlands both with 4 points. France and Norway looking top of their little group. France top by 6 points, Norway with just the 1 win, Portugal and England 4 points, but Spain with 3, Sweden with 4 points, Denmark, Italy with 3, but Wales still sitting there with 1, and still obviously more games to play. Did you get to catch much of what was happening with the Nations League, and what was your general thoughts?
I mean, I'm going to be honest, I didn't see much of it. I've been quite busy with my own football. But the bits that I did see, I managed to watch the Spain-England match and against Portugal. And yeah, I think like the scores and the points that you just run through, like it's really exciting as it stands at the moment. I think it's really open and all to play for, like in terms of this, but also looking ahead to the Euros. So I think that's really exciting for women's football generally.
Very good. I got to my first international game as well during that week with England under 23s playing against the France under 23s, because obviously the circus came round to my neck of the woods, which was lovely, in Stevenage at the Lamex Stadium. It was a great opportunity to go and watch some youth football. And again, internationals. And it was really nice to see. There was almost 3,000 people there, which isn't too bad really for what was effectively a friendly. There wasn't anything riding on it at all. And so yeah, it's very, very nice to see some international football happening. And we're not going to spend too long really on the Nations League, but we did want to touch on it. We didn't want to spend a whole fortnight being off and not mention what's going on at the Nations League, but plenty there to look forward to. It's only the first 2 games, so it's really just getting underway, but it does mean that, I mean, JJ, I think there might be sarcasm steeped in this comment. A mid-season Nations League, always thrilling, but there's stories starting to be told. We've certainly seen the introductions to these stories, and you can see where the threads might be going and where you could pull them there. Fun fact, if you were on the previous channel, I completely mispronounced this, so I'm scared of saying it again. But yes, I did see that Sonia Bonpastor was there, but I did not physically see her. Long story short, I've been going and been around Stevenage since 1996. It's been a long old time that I've lived there. The first time I watched Stevenage, I was in the East Terrace. I went over to the main stand for a couple of games. I've even been in the North stand. This was the first time I got to be in the South stand, because it's the away end. Why would you go there? And that was what happened. So the tickets came over to there. So that was a lovely little thing. It took me 29 years to complete the Stevenage Stadium. But she was in the main stand. So my eyes aren't that good. I could barely see Kayla Rendell down the other end for the first bit. So I didn't physically see her. But yes, I was very aware that she was there. So nice to see her there as well. I think that was a really good thing that you've got these WSL managers coming out to watch some of these under 23s play football. And if you are a young footballer playing internationally, and that you've got the manager of one of the greatest teams in the WSL watching you, I mean, that's going to put a little bit of pep in your step, isn't it? So it's quite good. I mean, B, you tell me, you played football. Nobody's ever come to watch me play football. That's not happening. But have you ever had that where you know there's somebody, what's the term I can use, important in the stands? What does it make you do? Does it put a little bit too much pressure on you, or is it more exciting? What does it do to you knowing there's these people watching?
Yeah, I mean, it always comes through, like someone finds out that there's so-and-so in the stand or whatever, and you normally find out as an athlete. So I'm sure that under 23s all knew that Sonia was there. But yeah, I mean, I guess different players react to it. I think for me, it would be quite motivating. Like I'd probably up my game. I don't know, just that extra bit of motivation. But yeah, maybe for some players it's a bit too much pressure and they don't have their best game because of it. But yeah, for me, it's definitely a motivating factor.
I mean, rumor has it, Tony, that she just came because she knew that I was going to be there. But she obviously didn't. I don't know is the honest answer. But there's some good players there. Katie Robinson was playing. Kayla Rendell, of course, like I say, was in goal. So there was quite a few players that were looking quite good from that England team. So we shall see if she makes a move for them over the next few months. But yeah, good stuff. So there we go. That's the internationals out of the way. I think it might be time to get ourselves into the WSL, which is a great place to be. And let's be honest, there's really only one place I feel that we can start. And it has to be with the result that Brighton have managed to pull off against Chelsea. Now, Uncle Montana's already put in the chat that this is just an ordinary thing for Chelsea. They played the internationals, they've come back, and they never play well on the first game on their return. But Sean, you're a Brighton fan, we know this, so I'm sure you will be entirely unbiased with what you're saying there. But what do you reckon? Because neither of you thought that Chelsea were going to lose any points up until the end of the season. It's almost like I kind of did this like a little voodoo doll thing in the hope that something might happen like that. But like it was unexpected, but it's a pleasant surprise at the same time. And for the WSL, this has got to be a good thing, surely. Even if the door doesn't end up being entirely opened, as Shane puts here, it's not locked. It might be shut, but it's not locked, and it could start to open if more points get dropped. Is there any possibility of that? And what did you make of this game? Because for me, that's quite big.
In my head, Brighton won 2-2. It's very rare that you win a draw, but Brighton won that draw hands down. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we've seen Chelsea, there was that draw against Leicester. There was a narrow win over Everton. There's this draw now, and you're starting to think, oh, is it a bit of fatigue maybe on Chelsea's side? But I think every team goes through a blip. Even we saw Liverpool men, they had a bit of a blip, and their blip involved 1 loss and 2 draws, and now look at them now. You're like, it does happen. But from a Brighton perspective, I was really impressed. I think it's the best I've seen Madison Haley play for a really long time. Marissa Ollis-Laggers has played really well all season. We saw that again. Lasada getting a goal, really pleased for her. From a Chelsea perspective, a little worrying that Gurma has gone down and gone off so quickly. Is that serious? We don't yet know, but they've got an injury list that's mounting a little bit now. I'll be a little bit worried, but and you know what? Again, their goal was offside. I'll have Chelsea fans saying, "Oh, Brighton time wasted. Oh, Brighton did this." Yeah, we're Brighton. We don't spend £1 million on a player. Like, you have got enough good players and enough valuable players to be beating us. If you're going to complain about us time wasting, so what? And Lauren James was clearly offside for that goal, by the way. So really, it should be a Brighton win. But I know it's really good for Brighton after a really bad run of games as well. We've been not great, and we still haven't won since November. But this feels like a real turning point. But for Chelsea, I do think it's a blip. As I said in the comments, if they drop points on Wednesday to Leicester, I believe it's Leicester for Chelsea. Obviously, getting a draw up at King Power earlier this season, but if they drop points there, then I do think we need to begin to have a serious discussion about what comes next.
It's quite a thing. Uncle Montana saying, Sean, our goal was offside, and you lot got away with 2 handballs in the box. Maybe so. But B, for you, I mean, it was totally unexpected. I don't think anybody thought that Brighton were going to come away with a draw. Brighton have been surprising people all season, and I say that respectfully. They have been. This has not been something that I think even the most hardened of Brighton fans were expecting. So to come out there and get a draw is quite something. But I mean, for the league itself, this is important, right? That actually we don't just end up with, and again, I say this with love. I'm not coming at this from a Manchester United fan's point of view, just for anything like that. It doesn't really matter who the other teams are. you don't just want it to be a procession from start to finish every single year, because it doesn't become a spectacle then, does it?
Yeah, I mean, for the league, it's so important that the matches are competitive and that you go into a game not necessarily knowing who's going to win before we've even kicked off. We don't start a season knowing who the two teams competing for the league are, 2 or 3 teams or whatever. I feel like that's so important, and that's how we're going to grow the game and get more interested in it when it becomes more interesting and exciting to watch from the scoreline point of view. That's how you get more neutral fans of all sorts of different teams. So I think it's so important for the league, but also just the growth of women's football in this country generally.
No, I tend to agree. And yes, we know they're not always just processions. They do get taken down to the last sort of day. But I do feel like there is a massive, like an inevitability about who's going to win the league. So yes, I mean, United have technically taken down to the last game a couple of seasons ago. But with every single year, it has felt like Chelsea are not just massive favourites and the most likely, but that they just will. It would be a miracle if any other side managed to do it. And so it does feel like if we'd have hit the point this season where Chelsea were 7 points clear and they remain 7 points clear for the next 4 or 5 games, it does become a procession, and it's a very, very difficult situation to be in. And people are talking about, potentially losing points midweek, but this is it. You play against the City side, all of a sudden, it's not as simple. And I guess we're just going to want a bit more excitement. We're going to be talking a bit about the WSL as a whole and the way these changes and things like that are potentially going to be implemented. This will form part of that conversation, but absolutely, I think the Chelsea game was, a very big one, and to have got the draw was quite something. Now we had 2 other games that went on that were, technically pretty simple. United taking on Leicester City 2-0, no major dramas there. They're second in the league and looking entirely comfortable. There was no real danger, I don't think, against Leicester. Have United surprised you in any way, shape or form? They really struggled last season. They didn't finish 4th, which has been like their niche position over the course of their time in the WSL. Obviously, there was that one time where we did manage to finish in the top 3 and had a little sniff of what it might be like to play in the big leagues. But generally, it's been there or thereabouts, but at the moment, seeming to just carry on a very even keel, quietly just going about their business and racking up the results. Has there been any surprise about how United have performed for you this season?
I don't know about surprise because United have a really strong squad, but yeah, they're performing really well this season, and that's brilliant to see. And just the more top teams in the WSL competing and performing, I think the more exciting it is for the whole league in general.
Fair enough. Sean, for you, you've spoken a lot about United. You've been on the United WFC and the United Men's channel talking about things that you've seen around Manchester United. For you, what's the difference this season for them? Because they did struggle. Liverpool had a great season last season, finished above them, and that it looked to be like it was a poor season for United, but they went on to go and win the FA Cup, which, if rumours are to be believed, is what gave Mark Skinner another year in post. But what do you make of how United have managed to attack this season so far? Because generally they've looked maybe not comfortable in every single game, but they've gone through them without any major dramas.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, as Shane said in the comments, I think the defence has been a real upgrade, and it's difficult to know how it's happened because it's still Maya Letizia and Millie Turner at the back, but I think Jade Riviere has been so good this season. I know she didn't play on Sunday, but having Gabby George back as well, it just adds a bit of solidity to players. Round pegs in round holes, you get it done, and And Fallon Turner's choice as well. I think there was a lot of concern when Mary Earps left or what would happen, but you wouldn't. Who Mary Earps? Who, as far as United are concerned, I think Fallon's been terrific in goal. I think that's 10 clean sheets now this season. Like that's insane. And yeah, I just think I said before the togetherness at Man United is incredible. What the whole team have been through, regardless of the noise going off in management and in ownership. That's fine. We'll leave that for another day. But that togetherness on the pitch from your players, if you know you're going onto the pitch and you will fight all of you for one another, give 100% for one another, that can get you a really long way. And I think that is really benefiting Man United so far this season in particular.
No, again, I think fair points made by the pair of you on both of those. And equally, we look at the likes of Manchester City. They had a slightly different result, but 2-1 against the Spurs side that have been very inconsistent, I think, so far this season. But again, a reasonable result there for Man City, who had a bit of a blip around about the time that Manchester United came knocking, and since then have sort of rebuilt themselves and steadied the ship.
Yeah, I think it would, like, you would have expected Man City to get some points in that game, especially the other week when Tottenham seemed to be struggling against Arsenal. But yeah, I think, like you said, Tottenham have been slightly unpredictable this season. So yeah, I don't know. Good result for Man City, but maybe some positives there for Tottenham as well.
Just occurred to me that I've muted myself, and I'm happily talking away to myself, and then it pops up saying you muted. And oh, lovely, and nobody said anything except for Michael eventually. He's pointing out what Shane had said there. They remain ridiculously open at the back. Spurs should have got something from the game, and as stated before here, United remain second into their last 3 games. Now, I wanted the United pundits to give Skinner his credits. Yes, Barry, I'm talking to you, Connor, as well. Listen, I've got that. There's no arguments, I don't think, from any Manchester United fans that if you were being serious, you wouldn't turn around and say that Mark Skinner is going to get his marching orders anytime soon, based on what's going on the field. That there's still lots to be said about what's happening off the field as to whether or not Mark Skinner is the person to maintain the culture at the club. But that's something that you'll never know unless you're part of the club or unless you're inside or one of those people that can get information from within the club, which is not something that you're going to find from me because I definitely don't have those sorts of conversations. So it's incredibly difficult to fully understand that. But in terms of on the pitch, you can't argue with it. There'd be no major reason to turn around to Mark Skinner and release him from his contract when you're second in the league and still doing quite well in the FA Cup. So, 100%, if he's going in and looking for contract renegotiations at the moment, he's got, to quote Donald Trump, he is holding the cards on that one. He definitely seems to have them. So, be very interesting to see how they get on. And of course, we kind of had to lead to this one as we were talking about the top 4. I'm not going to lie to you, B. There was a very brief moment where I was giggling heartily at the Arsenal score, and I was because I didn't give West Ham a hope nor a prayer. I think I had Arsenal down to win this something like 3 or 4-0. There was no part of me that thought that West Ham were going to do anything. So when I saw that they were 2-0 up, I found it funny. Obviously, Chloe Kelly went and scored, and it's 2-1. And you think, well, that's it now. Arsenal are likely to come back. But then, immediately after half-time, they still go on and score another goal. It's like 3-1 now all of a sudden. You think, crikey, this game is absolutely done. Arsenal have absolutely dropped it. And then out of nowhere, 3-2, 3-3, 4-3. A massive turnaround. These are the sort of games that football is built on because it takes you absolutely everywhere emotionally. obviously we know you're an Arsenal fan, but tell us a little bit about that game and how important that could be come the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. This is the kind of game that everyone loves to see in football as a neutral fan. I mean, obviously, as an Arsenal fan myself, an easy win would have been nice, but just an all-round exciting game of football. And I think it speaks volumes that Arsenal were able to come back from 3-1 down, and in the place the game was to still get the 3 points. I think that says a lot about the character of the team and kind of what Rene's building at the club. So I think that's brilliant for them. But also, yeah, I think I'd agree with you. It's might be crucial come the end of the season when it comes to top 3 Champions League spots, that kind of thing. I think them getting 3 points here is massive for them.
I mean, it was, and again, these 6 minutes, 6 of the wildest minutes of football I've ever seen. Sean, I mean, what an advert, first of all, for the WSL. We're sitting here talking about how, Chelsea just marching through to another title maybe doesn't give you the best view of the WSL as a competitive spectacle. But then you end up in a situation like this where you have a side that have done, okay in terms of their time in the WSL, but at the end of the day, they're still 9th, only 8 points off of the bottom 3. And you kind of think to yourself, these are the results, these are the matches that really do entice people into watching football. I mean, I've been a great believer. You talk about how you grow the women's game. It's about getting people to care. You want them to, they've got to be emotionally invested. If you're not emotionally invested, you can take it or leave it. You won't come back. But if you can get yourself emotionally invested in football, you're going to come back and watch it. And that's kind of what you want in the WSL. You want these matches that are going to make you go, oh, well, hang on a second, what's happening over here? Because once you're emotionally invested, you're going to want to come back more and more and more. This result, I mean, I'm not sure there's neutral sitting there going, oh my goodness, yes, Arsenal now all of a sudden are a team that I want to follow. But you're going to be a bit more interested in the product.
Whenever you're introducing someone to women's football, you just want an entry point. You just want that one bit where, like, right, I get it. And from West Ham winning 3-1, 51st minute, 62nd minute, Arsenal winning 4-3. And even right at the end, Beth Mead has to clear that corner right off the line. And it was drama until the very end. It was brilliant. But I'm really keen from a tactical perspective. I'm really keen to give Kyra Cooney-Cross some credit when she came on. I think she came on and absolutely changed the game in that midfield for Arsenal, because I think Kim Little and Leah Volti have done wonders for Arsenal. They will go down as Arsenal greats forevermore, no doubt about it. But I think Cooney Cross proved that she is the future. She is going to be the midfielder for Arsenal going forward. Is she probably the best midfielder at the club? That's not for me to debate. But just having someone like her, a young player who's it's taken time for it to grow into the WSL, but now that was a 50th Arsenal appearance already. I thought she's not even been there that long, and they'll have already done 50 appearances. But yeah, I thought she came on, completely changed the game. Real joy to watch. But yeah, if you're a football fan, you see on Twitter 51 minutes, West Ham winning 3-1, 11 minutes later, Arsenal winning 4-3. You're going to switch over. And even if you switched over after all the goals, you would have still been thoroughly entertained. And we want to be entertained in football, and we certainly got that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not kidding. And Shane pointing out that Stinabatis was important as well. A constant movement pulled the West Ham back 5 apart a bit and made the aim that little bit more chaotic. Superway is saying, is it time for Kim Little to move on? I'm going to let you answer that, B.
I think maybe on the pitch, like Kim Little's technical ability and fitness, like she's getting a bit older now. I think that could be questioned, but I think probably what she's bringing to the side that might not be so obvious watching from afar is probably her leadership skills, and that's probably super important for them in the training ground, but also on a match day. I think there's probably a lot that she's bringing that might not just be the football. So I don't know. I think it's hard to say definitively unless you're in there in the environment.
Interesting. Shane saying she won't be. She's extended for another year, so becomes a bit of a moot point anyway. But there we go. You asked the question. We thought we'd throw it around there and have a look ourselves. So there you go. That's the top 4 kind of looked at in the WSL. And again, as it stands, Chelsea on 41 points, Manchester United 5 points behind with 36 points, Arsenal 3 behind, United, City still sitting outside the top 3, 2 points behind Arsenal, 10 points obviously between Chelsea and City. So it's quite an interesting one because, and I suppose this would be the final question I've got around the sort of the top half of the table at the moment, is there are a lot of people, like, I mean, Sipaway's already mentioned it, that will be second. Sorry, Manchester United will be second until the last few games of the season. Do you think it's just those last few games that cause people to think that way, Sean? Because the distance between Manchester United and Chelsea is the same distance as the one between Manchester United and Man City. Is it just down to that last 3 games that you think people are so negative about the chances that Manchester United have? Because why is it not equally as feasible? Because you see people saying the door is not open. Why is it not equally as feasible that Manchester United, being only 5 points away from Chelsea, can catch Chelsea, but it is 5 points between City and United, and yet people think City can catch United? Might seem like a silly question, but I've asked it now, so let's see how you go. What do you reckon?
I think you look at those. I think just because it looks like a gauntlet for Man United at the end of the season, and historically, United against those 3 teams, it hasn't been brilliant. For example, so I don't think that's. I think that's a reason why. It's just because the history, and because you are literally going bang, 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 and that's a lot. Mentally, physically, that's a lot to go through to get 9 from those 9 points from those 3 games would be unbelievable. But even in the middle of that, you've got Everton at home. I think this is a really resurgent Everton. Yeah, if you look at the final 5 games, you've got Everton home, West Ham away, and then those 3 games. Now, Everton, I think, are a changed side completely with the new signings, and then West Ham away. We've seen what West Ham can do. So I think it's a difficult 5 games, if you ask me. Obviously, the 3 at the end are going to catch your eye, but those 5 games, I wouldn't write off Everton whatsoever. And West Ham away is going to be a tricky game. So maybe it's because United's history against the big teams, and yeah, I think that is all it is. And City and Arsenal have shown they can beat Man United and beat each other and whatnot. So I think it's just a bit of that. But there's United shouldn't be written off whatsoever. No, they've still got a really good chance in this league.
I think that's the thing. I think there are, oh dear, wasn't expecting that to go up. I think there's a lot of reasonable points that are being made there by the people in the comments and by yourselves there. But B, for you as well, why do you think it is that the narrative is so much that United can't catch Chelsea, but City can catch United?
I think that might come from just historically how good Man City have been in the past in the WSL, and maybe how good Man City have been in the past, and maybe not Man United. I think there might be an element of that, but I don't know. I think you make a valid point that Man City are the same distance away from Man United as Man United are from Chelsea. So I think it's an interesting question.
Oh my! There we go. Goodness, my laptop there just decided it was not going to play at all. If you could see what's going on with it, it's unreal. At one point, the screen was like that big. I'm like, oh my word, we're going to have a problem. What I was going to ask you though, B, from that is that one of those last 3 games is Manchester City, so potentially whether or not City catch United could be based on that one match. Can you see? I don't think City are as scary as, say, Arsenal and Chelsea might be at that point. So, in terms of the top 3, I'd argue United still very much in with a good shout of top 3, even if they don't manage to barge through that open door that Chelsea have left.
Yeah, I mean, I think United are definitely still in contention for the top 3, and they will be at that point in the season as well. But yeah, that'll be an exciting game, and I think that will be a really open game where it could go either way for either team.
What I would say about that City game, it's at Old Trafford. There is a caveat with Man United playing at Old Trafford. It's not the greatest record. Alex Greenwood's going to be back for Man City. Lauren Hemp is going to be back. Benny Shaw will have a good run of games. City will have a lot of key pieces back for that game, which I think makes them a lot stronger as well. Which is, I think, maybe a reason again why we're saying that City have a better chance, because if you have Hemp, Greenwood, Shaw, Miedema, Rord, Hasegawa, like that's a strong team on paper. So I think maybe that's another reason why we're saying City have a chance more than United potentially.
It's going to be very interesting, that's for sure. As we move ever so slightly further down, we have obviously seen a bit of a managerial merry-go-round, as I like to call it. And I mean, my goodness, that's probably the nicest way of putting it at the moment, because goodness me, it's all going a little bit Pete Tong around the WSL. 3 managers were sacked / left their posts, mutually agreed, all those sorts of things, pushed out the door, whatever you might want to call it. And all for very interesting reasons. Remy Allen was obviously one of the ones that went. She is the Southampton women's manager and 8th in the championship at the time when Remy left the club. So that is obviously one of those situations, Southampton aside, that were traditionally battling to try and get at the top of their divisions. But we've got to talk, I think, about the 2 WSL ones. We're going to talk about Matt Beard. We'll talk about him next. But I'm interested, first of all, to talk a little bit about the Crystal Palace change. So, as we know, Palace are currently sat rock bottom of the WSL, 4 points away from Aston Villa, with just the 7 games left to save themselves. Now, they've been and got rid of Laura Kaminsky. She's gone now, so she won them promotion and has been given a bit of a run. But at this point, Palace have obviously decided that they need to make a change. They've done that. They brought in a guy whose name I'm probably going to butcher, but after the problems I had with Sonia Bampasta a minute ago, I'll give it a crack. Why not? Leif Smeerud, I think, is what we would be doing. I've got no idea if that sounds right. It could be Leif Smeerud. If we've got a Norwegian anywhere around, that'd be helpful. But he's been a manager of Norway, both the men's and women's side. It's an interesting situation. 7 games left to go. And as Sipiway says here, I think it's quite right. What's the Palace manager going to do with 7 games left, playing a brand new system of football at this point of the season? Is this the decision that ensures that Crystal Palace go back to the Championship this year? B.
I don't know if you can say that it's going to be the thing that ensures that they go back to the Championship. I don't know about that, but as someone who's experienced a lot of managerial changes as a player, I think it's really tough. I think it's really hard from a player perspective under a new manager. Obviously, you've got maybe the benefit of the players turn up a bit more in training and matches because they want to impress. It's a new opportunity for those who weren't getting a look in before. But I do think changing the system, changing the tactics is really tough on the players. So it will be interesting to see what the reaction from the Crystal Palace players is over the next few weeks.
Again, you're a player. You've been in those situations. We talk about these new manager bounces. You must have been in teams and squads where you start a season, you have a manager, and you end the season. It's a brand new manager. What does it bring to a dressing room? How is that different? Because we see it as fans and we look at it and, yeah, it's brilliant. They come in, they've got all these new ideas. It's a brand new energy. What do you think it is? Because in my old age, I just sit here and think it's just people trying to impress the manager. And then once they've impressed the manager and they've got themselves into a position and they feel like they've got it sorted, they can just relax a little bit more. Do you think there's anything to do with that, or am I just being a cynical old man?
Yeah, I think there is a bit of, once you're in, maybe you've got more chance of getting more game time, that kind of thing. So I think a new manager is definitely brings a fresh perspective and maybe gives players that weren't getting a look in before a chance. But I think one of the things from a player point of view that you don't necessarily see from the outside is a new manager means a whole new backroom stuff. You'll have new coaches, new analysts, new whatever. It probably means a complete reshift of that. So the whole environment will be completely new, and that can maybe be difficult, or maybe it's what Crystal Palace need. I don't know.
It's definitely an interesting one. I mean, that to me, that feels almost like a nightmare in a lot of ways, because you've got so many people around you that you trust and that you get on with, and now to have to try and rebuild those relationships. That's what pre-seasons effectively are for, to try and build those relationships so when you step into it. Oh, thank you so much, Tony. So it was Leif in the end. I thought it might have been once I said it and called him Leif, but it was game over by that point. I'd already ruined it. So there we go. But Sean, for you as well, I mean, Laura Kaminsky, she's done a great job at Palace, really. She got them promoted. She's given them a shot at the WSL. They've had an opportunity this season. It's quite difficult to come into the WSL and remain in the WSL and be competitive in any way, shape, form, or fashion. They've got 6 points in their 15 games they've played so far. Is it the right decision?
I think it's harsh. I think it's really harsh. I don't think it's the Palace team have embarrassed themselves in WSL. I think far from it. But it's just the timing. I look at Liverpool, Southampton, Crystal Palace. It's like the owners have come back from the international break. Looked, they're still there. I thought you were meant to sack. No, you were meant to sack her. Oh, we're going to have to do it with 2 games before this next game. It's like, come on, we're better than that. But I think it's a bizarre decision to hire this manager. I was looking at, he's not managed a club. The only club team he's managed was a university side many moons ago. This is someone who's been in the Norwegian system through youth age groups and the women's team for many, many years. To come into a WSL club who are bottom of the table and your next league game is against Aston Villa. That is huge. If they lose to Villa, I think it's done. I cannot see them looking at the remaining fixtures get anything from it. So if he loses that, they're done. Like it's bizarre. If they brought in Matt Beard, for example, say Matt Beard went straight to Palace, complete different complexion. It gives them a bit of grit, someone who knows the league, someone who knows how to get out of danger. But it's always a risk going for someone unproven. But for someone unproven who hasn't managed club football ever, that is a huge, huge risk for Crystal Palace.
It is quite a big risk, really, in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, and you mentioned Matt Beard, so we'll put him into the mix as well now, because we're talking about a Crystal Palace side that are bottom of the table here, B. But when you then look at Liverpool, who are 12 points better off, I mean, they are the epitome of just stuck in mid-table. You know, they're fighting against Brighton in the hope that they can finish in that 5th spot that Manchester United made famous last season. But it's not looking great for them. You know, yes, they're a point behind Brighton. Equally, they're 3 points clear of Everton in 8th. And of course, there's always going to be that Liverpool and Everton pride between them, wanting to finish above them, a bit like Arsenal and Spurs often have as well, in terms of wanting to finish above each other. But the Matt Beard one for me seemed like, a bit of a surprise, really. I don't think anybody really expected Matt Beard to go, because it was just so mid-table, so simplistic. There was pretty much where they were expected to be. Nobody was, it was going along quite swimmingly. Maybe they were going to try and rebuild a little bit more for next season. What did you make of the whole Matt Beard situation? Why do you think it is that Matt Beard has walked away from Liverpool.
I think you're right. From the outside looking in, it's a questionable decision. It's confusing why that has happened. But if I was to take a guess, there's probably something that's happened in the training grounds that we don't see. Maybe the players don't get on, disagree with his style of tactics. I don't know. I'm guessing there's got to be something behind the scenes that us as fans aren't able to see. And that's presumably something between the players, the manager, the way the club are running. It could be a number of things. But yeah, I would have to take a guess at that.
Well, Sean, B's guessing. There's been a few things, and this is kind of what I was going to go at with you there, Sean. Tom Gary reported on the inside it wasn't a shock, and the feeling was that Beard couldn't take them any further. I mean, we talk about taking them any further. Yes, Liverpool are a big name across football, but they weren't necessarily a side that were looking at any point to really break into the top three, or really the top four. I know we said they finished above Manchester United, but I think that was very much to do with the dire performances that Manchester United had towards the end of the season, rather than Liverpool really being outstanding in their field. Outside of the traditional top four, as it seems to be at the moment, I don't think you could really have asked for Liverpool to be much further than they currently are. Without investment in the side from Liverpool now, that's going to be the difference. A bit like it has been for United as well. That you know, to break into that top three, there needs to be investment. You need to buy some players that are a step up from perhaps where you've been doing your shopping before. You know, maybe a little bit less Tesco's. Maybe you've got to start thinking a little bit more Waitrose, or if you can't afford that, Marks and Spencer's. You know, you've got to start thinking about some of these places that you might want to go and do your shopping. So this whole Matt Beard thing here, it does feel like there's more to it. Do you think that, as much as Tom Gary's saying it was that the club don't think that he can take them forward anymore, do you think there might have been a little bit of Matt Beard saying, well, if you're not willing to invest, I can't do anything more for you? Because if that's the level that you want to be at, and this is how much you want to put in, a team is not going to jump into the top four just by spirit and effort alone.
Ultimately, I think he's a victim of his own success. I think they were brilliant last year, absolutely brilliant. But Liverpool thinking they're financially backing him is not the same as financial backing like a Gareth Taylor's going to get, a Mark Skinner's going to get, a Rene Slavers, a Sonia Bonpastor, so on and so forth. And it's a shame because one thing Matt Beard said a couple of weeks ago when it came to player contracts coming up, he said the club, it's like out of their hands whether the club are going to keep their players or not. And you look at who was out of contract at Liverpool this summer, and it's quite scary who they can lose. Kerry Holland, Nagano, Taylor Hines, Grace Fisk. I think Jem Bonner's another. There's a lot of key players Liverpool, and you think all the loans that are going to have to go back as well. It's quite scary if Liverpool do not financially back whoever's coming in next. You are losing the whole core of that Liverpool midfield in particular, and someone in Taylor Hines who has been a great leader. Grace Fisk is having an unbelievably good season. He could all go if there's a better offer around and they feel like they want to take it. So, yes, I think Beard's been harshly done by, but if you Liverpool are not a poor club, they can invest, and if they invest in that women's team, there's so much potential there. But yeah, I just think Beard's a victim of his own success.
Yeah, I feel like that's reasonably fair. They brought in an interim manager in Amber Whiteley, I think with her name, and very interesting that she immediately threw her hat in the ring. It was a bit like watching the WWE when they're talking about the Royal Rumble and who's going to be in there. They're like, yeah, stick my name down. I'll absolutely be having a go. Do either of you know much about Amber Whiteley? Because I've got to be honest, she didn't really know. That's what I mean. So again, you're looking at people in the chat talking about unproven men. again, there's unproven women out there as well who are looking for their opportunities, and this really is an opportunity for her to find a place in the WSL. And just imagine, I mean, if they can go above the mighty Brighton into fifth, who knows? That very well might be the catalyst for Amber to get into the game a little bit more there. So, yeah, some interesting things happening. And as we start talking about these things, we're talking about there is a divide in the WSL as things stand. And there is. I don't think there can be much of a disagreement about that, especially when you start looking at the way in which the teams are sat. So we've spoken about the top four. As we've said, you've then got your Brighton and Hove Albion down to about Everton, 19 to 16 points, looking pretty reasonable. And then you've got your next third, the bottom third, which is your West Ham down to Crystal Palace, who, I mean, West Ham are probably safe, but who technically could be dragged into a relegation fight. Some might say that's a little bit exciting, but at the moment, the way the WSL clubs are, they are voting by the end of this season on whether or not they should scrap relegation. So the idea being that if the vote passes, relegation would stop from the 2026-2027 season. And the plan would be to gradually increase the size of both the Championship and the WSL. Now, for people that either haven't been paying attention or haven't seen these things coming up, there's been a lot of talk about tier 3 to tier 6, and there's going to be some big revamping going on there, which will include obviously the WNL increasing the number of teams that they have in their leagues. Tier 4 will have playoffs up to tier 3 as well. So there's lots of things going on there. Tier 5 ends up with a lot more teams inside of it. Tier 6 blows the windows wide open. There's almost hundreds of potential spaces that they're trying to look to fill. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of change. Now, the WSL and the Championship stayed very quiet whilst this was going on. And this is obviously part of the reason why, because they are now looking to start thinking about their changes. So we've always said that WSL does need to increase. They want to increase it to 16 teams for both of them, leading up to the 2030-2031 season, which is 6 years away, 5-6 years. It's a long, old road. They would continue to promote, so allowing one extra club to join the top flight every season for the next 4 years, and that relegation could then be reinstated in the 2030-2031 season. But there is also the possibility that they might never bring back relegation and that we end up with the American style, whereby they just have a group of teams that play time and again, never with the opportunity of relegation. Now, I'm going to ask you two what you guys think about this, because it's a very interesting situation. This idea that there's currently 12 teams, so 4 more seasons, you still have somebody promoted from the Championship, but nobody goes down. Is that really going to help? So let's break it down. We'll kick it off with the first bit. What are your thoughts, B, on them increasing the league? Let's go with that one first. So getting 16 teams into the league, is that a feasible and good thing that is needed in women's football right now?
I think the league does need to be increased at some point. I think it's a really small league, and I think at some point it does need to be increased. I think the question is whether increasing it is going to be beneficial at the moment, whether bringing in more teams, they might not be at the standard. So maybe there'll be a bigger gap between the top and the bottom, and that might not be what the league needs right now. It might not be what the fans want. I don't know. If the divide's too big, it's not exciting football to watch. So I do think that the league needs to be expanded. I don't know whether the way they're thinking of going about it is the right one. I don't know. I don't know if now is the right time either. I don't know when would be. I feel like women's football's growing, but I'm not sure if it's ready for that yet.
What do you think, Sean? We've spoken about how it does need to grow. We've spoken about this on this channel a few times, but 16 teams by 2030-31, is that reasonable? Is that feasible? Do you think that's the right thing to do? Because there is the danger. I mean, Alan's put here, how about just promoting 4 teams next season? And B's mentioned the point they might not be ready. You promote 4 teams from the championship, they're doing all right, but by drip feeding it over a couple of years, a few years, there is that element that the sides are going to grow, the game is going to grow. Is it the right sort of thing to do? Is that a sensible way? Because I've got to be honest, thinking about it, how else are you going to get teams into the WSL? They've got to come from the championship. You're not just going to randomly pick a side and go, oh, Accrington Stanley, we'll bring them in. Why not? They begin with A. That's a good choice. Let's go with that. There's got to be something to do with it, and it's got to come from the championship. Equally, you don't want to devalue the championship and change what's going on there just by taking, their best teams effectively and then leaving the championship into some sort of Lion King waste ground that Mufasa can look over and say, one day this will all be yours. We don't just want that. So what are you making of this idea of bringing the teams in the way that they are?
You say they have to come from the championship. This is a woman and a thing, Nikki Doucet, as Michael said, Celtic and Rangers. I don't remember them playing in the championship, and they're being headhunted to join this league. And we're now getting to a phase where what's Nikki Doucet and the WPLL doing? Like, what are they doing? What good have they done? What good stories have come out? Nothing. This is. Everyone agrees we need more teams in the WSL and Champion. There's no all saying, yeah, that is fine. We need more competition, and that comes with more teams. Absolutely fine. But this line that they're trotting out that, a closed league will mean clubs will have to invest more. They're going to invest more. You're not. You think Big Sir Jim's going to sit there, we can't go down. Oh, well, what's the point in investing in women teams? Daniel Levy, Karen Brady at West Ham. They know they're there. They're comfortable. They don't have to do anything. And they're just going to go, we'll be there next year. What's the point in investing? It's just, give me strength. The first thing she came in, Nikki Doucet, compared some football fans to being Swifties. What are we doing? What are we doing? We need football people making football decisions, because you can tell this is just Americans trying to Americanize something inherently English, British, European. Like, this goes against the whole sentiment of European football. It's just depressing. And what it would do for tier 3 and below, I dread to think. I think it could be the end of so many clubs, especially when you look at the championship. It's basically you want to fast track the likes of London City, the likes of Newcastle, the likes of Birmingham with these big owners. But look at someone like Durham. Like, it could potentially be the end for someone like Durham. It is quite scary. There's far better ways to do it, but this is a horrible way to do it.
So give us an example then, because we're talking about growing the league. We want to grow the league. We want them to expand the number of teams that are in there. So are we suggesting that a better way to do that is to promote 2 and relegate 1?
I think you're looking beyond that. I think there needs to be structures within the league before you even start moving clubs around. Structures to ensure anyone who comes up has a chance, whether that's salary caps or a certain number of homegrown players need to play. I'm sprouting things out, but I think stuff like that potentially just to give these new teams a chance of competing. Because look, Bristol City came straight back down. Palace are likely going to go straight back down. Like, I think there needs to be changes within the league to make it sustainable for everyone, to make sure everyone has some level to compete at. But if it stays like this, it's just going to be, I think structural changes need to happen in the league in terms of rules financially and registration before you change the rules on promotion relegation.
Interesting. B, anything you'd add to what Sean's just said there? I mean, you also said that there may be better ways to expand the league. What ones have you got under your cap?
I don't know, because I feel if you are trying to bring up more teams. So like you said, promote 2 and relegate 1. There's a chance that the one you've relegated is better than one of the 2 that you've brought up. Because I think there's a big salary difference, money difference between the Championship and the WSL. So I don't know what the best way to go about it is. I think it's going to be hard. And I think whatever they choose, there'll be some negatives to it. So I don't know. I just feel the way they're talking about going about it, like Sean said, could be quite damaging for the lower tiers. I just don't know how that's going to affect football in tier 3, tier 4 and below.
Well, I think it's fascinating just trying to look at how effectively the women's game is trying to grow in front of people's eyes, whilst also trying to be a recognised end product in some respects. And I think it's really tricky to look at all of these ideas. And I think you're never going to please everyone is the first thing that I think we need to be clear on. It doesn't matter what is chosen. If there's one thing that we've learned about life in the 21st century now, it's that not everybody's happy, and they're very happy to let you know that they're not happy. So there's going to be dissenting voices no matter what. But there is a lot that needs to be done within the women's game, like ridiculously so. And there's so many jobs at the moment that sort of knowing which one to pick, which one to go for is, I mean, I think really quite hard. So, I mean, you look at the idea that it could end up being a closed league. It's not a great idea, and it does effectively sort of leave the clubs, as Teacher Life says here, what's the difference between that and the Super League they wanted to introduce? I would suggest probably money would be the answer to that right now. But we are in a situation, as we said, where the top 4 are generally already a distance ahead of the trailing pack. And that's why when you get teams like Brighton nicking a point off of Chelsea, when you get teams like Leicester last season drawing against Manchester United and Liverpool finishing above Man United in the league as well, that's where all of these stories come in from. But equally, as Michael says here, what incentive would they have without the threat of relegation? They're not motivated to invest as it is at the moment. Clubs are not investing as much as they could do. And that was in response to what Sipaway says here, which is it's like the American sports showpiece and entertainment. No jeopardy. Clubs and owners relax. Players might end up relaxing too. We need jeopardy in sports. The thing that I would argue about the Americanization of it is that in America, the one thing that works well for them, because of the way their closed system is that you could be the worst team in the world. Well, I say in the world, technically, but within their leagues. And then you get the first pick. So you actually get teams who will actively turn around to their managers if they've lost 12 games on the trot and just say, just don't bother winning anymore. That's fine, because we'll get the top draft pick so we can get the best player in. With the idea being that they're constantly giving to the sides that aren't doing too well. So if you hit a situation like that, you can kind of see how this showpiece idea works and how potentially it becomes cyclical. But English football is just not that way. It never has been. It never will be. Football is about prizes, winning and losing. And B mentions if one team goes down, they could be worse than, could be better than the 2 teams that come up. But that is literally football, isn't it? You know, you hit a point where, I mean, Derby County, let's not forget, made it into the Premier League and then went down as being, you know, the worst side ever in terms of points. So you do hit a situation where these things have got to kind of happen. Is there, I mean, you say there's nothing positive really seeming to come out of what's happening with Nikki Doucet and all of these people that are involved in it. But how do we get to a good ending for the stakeholders? Because you need it to work for the WSL. That needs to be arguably the most exciting league in English football because it's the showpiece. It is the top league. You want that to be the jewel in your crown. But as B mentions, you've got to start thinking as well about the lower leagues and building on strong foundations. And I would argue when you go to the men's leagues, you've got a Premier League, absolutely you do, but Championship, all of the EFL, is quite strong. It's quite firm. They have established clubs. When you go into tier 5 and tier 6, some of these leagues have only got 9 teams because teams have had to fold, they're not working, the facilities aren't as great as they could be. It almost feels like we're building a league, but they're on very shaky foundations. And if we're going to look to do that, surely we need to solidify and strengthen what's going on in tiers 3 to 6 before we worry too much about what we're doing with WSL and the Championship to the level that they're suggesting.
I mean, Nicky Doucette could buy out the National League, have all of it, then you can make your own system where you can set your own rules all the way down. There's a checklist that needs to be complete, but to be honest, we're still very separate in the world of women's football. I still feel like you've got some of the top clubs where the owners see the women's football team as a tick box. Like it sucks to say, but it's true, and you can see those teams. You know who those teams are, and we'll go back to a fight about how important women's football is. We've got to show the growth, and if this is them trying to incentivize the owners, oh look, we can make it a closed league. That's fine. You don't have to worry. That's not the way to incentivize it. It's just I think this has opened up a whole can of worms that just sort of shows how much work needs to be done across the pyramid. Because I feel, because if it is a closed league, the top 2 leagues, then if you're a third tier team, if you're an owner, so well, I can't get to the top league. What's the point? That's the problem you're going to have. Is just, well, there's no point. We can't get there. Well, what's the point in trying to be the best in the third tier? There's no Champions League we can hope for. There's no European football. Can't compete for an FA Cup. Well, there we go then. We'll just call it quits because there's no point. There's no incentivization for those owners in the third tier and below. They're just look. It's well below my pay grade trying to think of some big old idea, but it's just so much needs to happen, and everyone has their own separate ideas. No one's trying to come together from third tier, second tier, third, and just come together for it. Right, we need a radical plan. No one's willing to come together, and we just need a bit more unity across the board before anything gets done.
But I suppose, B, this is part of it, isn't it? Is that we're talking about an institution that wasn't allowed to exist for 50 years and is trying to pull back those 50 years as quickly as is humanly possible, whilst also being under the microscope of some ridiculously small-minded men who are not willing to allow the women's game that opportunity to grow organically and want them to just stand on their own 2 feet without really any reparations or anything like that. So the only way in which the top league is going to grow and give these clubs the opportunity to have the infrastructure that they need without relying on the men's side to give them that funding is to get more money into the game. That happens through things like Sky Sports and TNT and DAZN, all of these channels going out there and investing more into the women's game, the BBC as well, to be fair. So they've got to kind of look at it from that side of it, how they can get the money into the game. You don't want it to be exactly like the men's game because that ends up being too monetized and then it just becomes about the money and not about the football. So it's less about excitement. So, you've experienced it from sort of all ends. You see it in the top level. You've played it in the WNL. You've been in the regionalised leagues as well. There's a lot going on through that, but the WSL is a million miles away from the regionalised leagues and even the WNL to a degree. It is that holy grail. I genuinely don't believe that football fans across the country would allow a closed league that remains closed. But that's the problem, isn't it? There's too much. There's too much to do, and nobody can agree on what it is that needs to be done first.
I think you're right that the way the women's football is going to progress is with more money, and that probably does come from TV rights and with Sky Sports and all of that. But the way you get that is by having exciting matches like the West Ham Arsenal at the weekend. And that comes from a really competitive league. I don't know if that's going to happen if we start bringing in 16 teams. I don't know if it's going to be as competitive as it is now. But also there's the whole point of what happens lower down. I think if you do bring more championships teams into the WSL, presumably that means more tier 3 into tier 2. But the clubs have the funding to step up into like a national league to travel all across the country to play matches rather than in their north and south. And then if you bring up more from tier 4 into tier 3, I suspect you'll see more clubs folding just because they don't have the funding to get travel expenses covered, is what I feel would happen. I mean, so I'm actually part of the FA National League player rep group. So the FA have set up to try and get the players to have their say on how the FA are running tier 3 and tier 4. And it's been really interesting. They've given us a lot of insight into these changes that they're looking to make in the 26-27 season. So I think it's the FA are working quite hard at it for at least the 2 leagues that they oversee. But I think there's a long way to go, and I think the money's just not there. Even the changes that the tier 3 and tier 4 are trying to make with increasing the standards, ensuring that all clubs meet a level of standards, I just don't know if the clubs have the money to all meet those standards to what the FA are expecting. And I think that's ultimately where it comes back to.
That's exactly it. And it is money. You know that. I mean, we've obviously been together at Stevenage, and we travel all the way to Wroxham, which is our furthest one, and you can get a bus for that one, but everything else you've got to drive to. And it's a difficult thing. That's why the regionalised leagues work so well. But even though they do work, you do end up with some crazy types of situations. I mean, I've noticed that Maidenhead are within effectively the southwest of the country. And Maidenhead, for anyone who wants to know, that is not the southwest of the country. It's not a million miles away from Reading. The Queen could have travelled there. So if you're sitting there, playing for Exeter and you've got to go to Maidenhead, that is a trek, let me tell you. It's not just around the corner. It's not an hour away. That is quite a thing. So when you then start saying to people, it's lovely when you start thinking, oh, we get to go national. We can go and see Sunderland. We can go and see this club. We can see that club. But it just doesn't translate, because without the money to be able to get those players there, these players aren't full-time players. They're not necessarily getting paid. So it's not a situation that's very easily done. And this is it. We're trying to build this all singing, all dancing cacophony of brilliance. But actually, without the money, it's not going to be sustainable. It's just going to be short. And as a result, you could end up with just the WSL and just the championship and everything else not even being professional or semi-professional, just being completely amateur and Sunday League-esque. And I don't think that really is what the women's game needs. But there we go. Anybody else got any thoughts to mention on the whole scrapping relegation and the changes that we have made? Anything else you want to add in on that, Sean? Or no, he was having a little think there. He's changed my note. Definitely not. I'm finished now. That'll do. Let's all go and watch EastEnders. And I've got to be honest, I think I agree with you, Sean. That's what everybody watches. So there we go. Well, listen, I think it's been a good show. We've had everything covered that we wanted to cover. And yeah, here we go. I think that is the perfect sort of way to end it. Thinking the underlying problem is the powers that be seem to be focused on raising the ceiling, but not the floor. And I would say that you don't necessarily need to raise the floor, but you've got to make it strength. You've got to strengthen it enough. Otherwise, you end up a little bit like poor old Sweep and Matthew Corbett when they go up into the roof and into the loft because he's trying to find old Matthew Corbett's tap shoes. And before you know it, Sweep's gone through the ceiling. Matthew Corbett's gone through the ceiling. Their legs are just dangling. And that's where you'll end up, through the floor and in a little bit of a problem. And as Mike always says here, what happens to Reading is what most club chairmen would do to their women's teams if they knew there wouldn't be backlash. And it's a really tricky situation, actually, that there are clubs out there, even now, who have done really well. They won, promotion after promotion after promotion. and then it's deemed that they're too high. They don't want to put the money in, and so they will take voluntary relegation. They'll allow themselves to be relegated, which is exactly what's happened to Reading there, to be dropped down, and they're getting battered in the league that they're in. So it's not cricket, really. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure once again to have you on. B, thank you very much for joining us. I noticed you were out on the streets of I was going to say Bishop Stortford, but it wasn't Bishop, Saffron Walden, doing your chitter chatter about Arsenal there. Where could people watch this stuff if they wanted to?
You can find me across most social media platforms at @BeatriceRogers_.
There we go. So go and get those into your phones now. Alternatively, you might be more interested in what's going on internationally, or finding out what is happening in the bonny lands of Wales. If they wanted to do that, Sean, how would they see that from you?
Yeah, Twitter @Sean Misra, same with my TikTok @Sean Misra for random ramblings about women's football. But no, been a good chat, and yeah, really nice to talk to you both as ever.
Excellent. Well, good to have you here. And if you want to follow me, I don't know why you'd bother, unless you're interested in finding out about Man United and Stevenage. And it's not really finding out, to be honest with you. But if you feel like you want to, feel free. It's a free world, isn't it, after all? Brilliant. It's been a pleasure to have you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we'll be back next week when, if I'm not mistaken, it's FA Cup time again, isn't it? Exciting. There you go. We'll see you next week then for a little conversation about Women's FA Cup. See you then. Take care, everyone.